what happens is, in such a pattern that we can share with you some of the triggers, okay? The first thing is, in most of these cases, or many of these cases, wait a second, let me back up from there. Children die of heat stroke in 3 different manners. 1, a parent unknowingly left the child in the vehicle. 2, the child somehow gained access to the vehicle and was not able to get out. And number 3, which is the lowest percentage, it's under 10%, is someone, like we call it knowingly, or left the child there because they were just run in for an errand, or left the car there, knew that the child was in the car. But that is the most infrequent part of this issue, and people don't understand that.
Yeah.
Because they really want to vilify and just spew all of these terrible things and vitriol and how stupid people are and how they shouldn't have children and they should be put in the car. But when we do hear those comments, and we hear them frequently, but that's because they don't understand how these can take place.
I think that's the one thing I did take from reading the article Fatal Distraction is this can happen to anyone.
Well, and that's the key. That is the key, and that's the number one piece of advice we try to get through so loudly is the worst thing anyone can ever do is to think it can't happen to them. And people do it because they want to push themselves away from this issue because it's so unthinkable and because they believe they're perfect parents. Well, a lot of this has happened to very perfect parents. And the key here is it's when our brain or our memory lets us down. And, I wish we were all perfect, but we're not. We are human beings. And, I can tell myself forever, and I can talk to my kidney and say, don't get cancer, right? And I can lead a healthy life. But my kidney, which is an organ, can get cancer. And it's not any different than saying, I'll never forget my child, I'll never forget my child. But with the right, or in this case, the wrong set of circumstances, it can and does happen to anyone. And as I mentioned, in 90% of the cases, it's the pillars of society. There is that 10% where there's drugs or alcohol or possibly interaction with Child Protective Services, but that truly is the minority.
So what sort of people, what cases do you know of?
Well, we know of, well over, 700 cases. I mean, we know a lot of them, but in general, if I had to just kind of describe to you a typical situation, is it would be a young child. The biggest percentages are children under the age of 1. And, when you are under the age of 1, you are in a rear-facing car seat. And really, you can't tell from the front seat if there's a child in there or not. You're working with a situation where anybody that has children, especially under 1 year of age, knows or can't predict from one one night to another if you're going to get a full night's rest or if you're going to be up all night with a baby that just can't settle themselves or colic or breastfeeding. You don't know. So then you've now got a baby in the rear seat, rear facing. They usually fall asleep. You can't tell if they're in there or not. And you as a parent are driving a vehicle and are exhausted. And probably the one thing that tops even all of that is the fact of if there's been a change in routine. So, things like this has happened with something as simple as a dad drops off a child at daycare, starts to go take the baby because it's a different provider, and comes upon a detour in the road and goes right instead of left. And that left turn takes him on the road to work. And that's where he goes because in his head he has made that stop. And, really, honestly does not understand or even know that the child has been left behind in the vehicle.
And this happens to mothers as well.
Oh, it happens to mothers, it happens to grandmothers, it happens to daycare providers.
You offer advice to parents on what they can do to try and prevent this. What are those steps?
Well, yes, absolutely. We want parents to be proactive. We have a program that's called Look Before You Lock. And here in the United States, we're getting those cards put into the parent packages after, a baby is delivered as part of the education process. Because people don't know about this, and they think their wonderful love would possibly prevent that from happening, but that isn't how it's going to work. So in the Look Before You Lock program, what we make are several suggestions. The first one is to take your handbag or your employee badge or your briefcase. How about your cell phone? Put that on the floorboard in front of where the child's car seat is. Because the idea is then when you arrive at your destination, that you will open the back door to retrieve those items, and that gives you that visual to make sure baby has been dropped off. The second idea we have, and I would suggest to do all of these, but the second idea is to put a stuffed animal in the child's car seat and always have it in there. But right before you're going to place the child in the car, take the stuffed animal and set it up front on the passenger seat. Because then you've got this visual reminder. We're very, very cue dependent as adults. And, after a while, it's such a habit, you almost train yourself. Stuffed animal up front, baby in the back. No stuffed animal up front, it's in the car seat. And you want to make sure your stuffed animal is big enough that you can't fit baby and the stuffed animal. So people have been successful doing that. And, there's many other things you can do, but one of the huge factors we have found is this happens many times because a parent or caregiver forgot to drop the baby at daycare. And again, here in the U.S., when kids start first, second, third grade, all the way up through high school, we have something that's called the absence line. And the way that works is if your child is not going to be at school that day, it is a parent's responsibility to contact the school and let them know where they are and why they're absent. And it's called the absence line. Well, a very strong recommendation we have is we need to take that same process and procedure and bring it down into the daycare, child care provider community. And so we suggest for parents to make sure they have an ironclad policy with their provider that says, I'm going to bring the baby here every day between 8 and 8:30. But if it gets to be 8:45 and you don't have a call for me and you don't have my child, here is every number imaginable to get a hold of me. Now, again, the onus has to be on the parent, but I can tell you that one phone call from a provider would have saved hundreds upon hundreds of little children's lives.
Many parents listening to this would say, I wouldn't do something like this. What message do you have for them?
Well, that is the worst mistake you can make, is to say it could never happen to you. And nobody likes to hear those words because we all want to think we are the best of parents, and we all try to be the best of parents. But this is a situation where, unfortunately, you're not really in control. And if everyone had ever experienced what we call autopilot, it's sort of like you get home and you're not quite sure how you got there, there's parts of that are very important or a part of this issue. And in so many cases, and this is supported by the fact that parents go back to daycare at the end of the day to pick up their child, and they're told the child was never dropped off. And of course, the first reaction is either the provider is joking or, they've done something to their child. And then, if you can imagine running back to the car and seeing your baby still in the car, and you know that they've been there all day, and it's, not a sight anyone would ever want to see. But that's how people find out about that. And that's not the way we want you to find out about that.